Father, we have come before you and we worship you, we adore you. And we pray, Holy Spirit, that this time you would give us wisdom and insight and discernment, and that we would hear your word and your word alone. In your name, amen. I don't know how many of you during the week sit down and watch soap operas. I don't watch soap operas, but I think there are ones out there, I don't know if they're still around. Days of Our Lives, that's still around there. But I remember there are also nighttime soap operas. Do you remember this phrase from way back in the day? Who shot JR?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you remember. I couldn't even tell you who shot JR. I was too young. I don't even think I was allowed to watch it. I just remember that phrase, who shot JR. And there's this idea in soap operas that there's a story that goes on, and in this story there are twists and turns and things that happen. And it's something that I grew up with in a different sense, because when I would go visit my grandparents, they would watch Hispanic or Latin American soap operas, which are very different than the American ones. And very different in this sense. In the soap operas that I can think of here in the United States, you have Days of Our Lives, As the World Turns, whatever. But they've been going on for how many years? 20 years, 30 years. And the story is like never ends. But in Latin American soap opera, they call them telenovelas. It has a beginning and it has an ending. It goes anywhere from 4 to 5 seasons, maybe a little longer, but it ends. And in that is a whole story. And the story has a theme and emotion, and it has the twists and turns and surprises that will blow your mind sometimes, and it puts you on the edge of your seat, and then you have to wait until next week. It was so important that even when we were visiting my grandparents, and if you don't know, we lived in Pennsylvania, they lived in Texas, and they only saw us once a year. And when their grandchildren that they only saw once a year were visiting, and the telenovela came on, we had to sit down and be quiet, because it was that important. They didn't want to miss what was going to happen, or miss a detail that would point to the end of the story, because that mattered. And as we kind of walk through the book of Ruth here, I get this sense and feeling that we're going through an Old Testament version of a telenovela. Ruth and Naomi have this major issue that's going on. They are widowed. Naomi, the mother-in-law of Ruth, they leave to another area. They're in the country of Moab, and she's with her husband and her sons, and they get married, and so Ruth becomes her daughter-in-law, but her husband dies, her 2 sons die, and there she is, a widow with her 2 daughter-in-laws that are widows, and they go back, and you get these twists and turns, and the one daughter-in-law says, I will go back to my town because there's a chance to remarry and be able to go into society okay. And Ruth and Naomi come back to Bethlehem, the place of hope, the town that she could go to, and they are at the very bottom of society, because in the patriarchal society, that's how it would have been. You're a widow, you can't inherit the land, you don't have this land, and not only can you not have this land, you don't have any sons, so you can't inherit the land again because your sons have passed away, so you have nothing and no right and no way to take care of this. Now, the law was clear. There was ways to help them. There were ways that they could be living without being destitute. As the harvest would come, the edges of the field would not be gleaned, and some farmers were very strict about the edge of the field, and some farmers understood what the law was about. There was a spirit to this law, not just a strict letter to this law and how it worked. And they knew that in Leviticus 22, Leviticus 25, and Deuteronomy 24, I believe it is, there were laws about helping those in these problems. If an Israelite person fell into debt and had issues, their family member, a rich family member, had the right and they were commanded to come and help them. That was called a kinsman redeemer. they would come and they would help them by buying them out of debt and helping them out. If a family member got into so much debt, got into so much trouble that the whole family had to be sold into slavery, in Leviticus 25 we discovered that other family members had the purpose and right to come and buy them out of slavery and set them back on their feet again. And then in Deuteronomy we see that if a family member is widowed and has no sons and has no land for inheritance, that a close kinsman, a close person, would not only redeem them, but had the right to marry them so that they could have a son, and then the son could inherit the land. And that is also to their loss, because it's not their land. They had to marry, they had to pay for the land, they had to raise the child, and all of a sudden it perpetuates a name that is not their own, but that was part of what the law stated that they should be doing. And so we see all these things at work and at play, and Ruth goes out in the field. Remember, she goes out in this field, and she works really hard, gleaning on the edges, and Boaz is there, and we feel the sense of a beautiful love story, not just between Ruth and Boaz, but between Naomi and Ruth, and overarching all of that is a love story that God has on his people as he's working through all of this. And at the end of the last chapter, we see that Ruth had come to Boaz in the middle of the night, and as her mother-in-law had put it, some scandalous ways, but the two of them acted in some very righteous ways and said, we're going to do this right. And he said, I will redeem you if it is right. And we get so excited because this is right. She has worked hard. She has been a woman of integrity. She has stayed with her mother-in-law and done the right things. And now it's like she's getting her due, and she's going to be okay, and she's going to take care of Naomi, and everything's going to go right. And then Boaz says, but there is somebody closer that can redeem you, and we should go to him first. And the twist begins. What in the world? And so we leave chapter 3 with this sense of hope and this sense of leaving this aloneness that this widow and her daughter-in-law, who was also a widow, had, and this hope on the edge, but maybe not. There's somebody else that can buy you instead of this beautiful love story that we have going on. That's how the law works, and laws are strange that way. Have you ever heard of strange laws like that? You know, I know that one of our deacons used to live in Virginia, and here's a law from Virginia. You can ask him about it, maybe he knows. It states this, that you're prohibited from killing any nuisance species. You know, nuisance species, possums and things like that, before 1 p.m. or after sunset on Sundays, except raccoons. Virginians must really hate raccoons, because raccoons, you may continue to kill them up to 2 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Not a problem, kill the raccoons. So, you know, in Indiana, you are not permitted to catch fish. And I looked this one up. There's actually a list of ways you can catch fish, but you cannot catch fish, one, with a firearm. I guess not. And two, with your hands alone. So you can't reach in and grab a fish with your hands alone. I don't make these rules up. I'm just telling you what this is. In Florida, people who own a bar, restaurant, where liquor is sold, they may be fined up to $1,000 if they participate or permit any contest of dwarf tossing. This is still on the books today. These are rules, laws on the books today. Now, Alabama, I like Alabama. Alabama's kind of nice. You may not impersonate a member of the clergy. That's pretty nice. I like that. Such a misdemeanor could cause actual jail time or a fine of up to $500. That's pretty good. So as we walk through this, and we go, these rules are weird. This Redeemer rule and some other rules we're going to see. It's not that weird once you start looking at our laws. And every state has laws that are similar, and that you go, why in the world? And if you go back to when they were written, you're going to find there's something behind the law. There's something that moved it along. And now that we're past those times and we read it, you know, that's really strange. But it made sense then, because there was a spirit that moved it to go that way. So we see how Boaz is working with the spirit of the law, not just taking the very edges of the field and leaving it along, but seeing that people are in need and giving them what they need. He understood the spirit of the law was they were to take care of those people. The spirit of the law is, yes, he has a chance to redeem Ruth, but he also knows that God is working, and he has to allow God to work and walk within the law to do that right. And so chapter 4 says this in verse 1. In the morning, Boaz is going to go right away. Remember, Naomi said to Ruth, Boaz is going right away. He's going to take care of this because I have a feeling about this. This is a beautiful love story, these people coming together. Now, Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. He went to the town business center, was usually at the front gate, and he sat down there. It says, and behold, the Redeemer, the closer person that had a right to buy Naomi and Ruth out of their destitute, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. He knew this would be happening. This is where he sits. And this other person, and interestingly enough, we never find out their name. Just leave that hang there and think about why. But he's called a Redeemer, and he has this right, and he comes by. It says this, and Boaz turns to him, and he says, turns aside, and says, friend, sit down here. There's lots of ways to translate this, but he is initiating a business transaction. In the way they understood it, this was a business transaction. And he turned and he sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. This, in our world, would be getting the lawyers together, getting witnesses together, being when we do a wedding ceremony, in the act of all of these witnesses, you were doing this. So everyone can say, I was there, I saw that, I attest to this. And so he's following the procedure as it needs to be done. And they sat down, and then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. That was Naomi's wife, Naomi's husband. And so Naomi is widowed, and she needs to sell the land. She's got to live somehow. She can't inherit the land and keep living off the land. It's not hers, but she can sell it so that she can find a way to live through old life. So I thought, Boaz says in verse 4, I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here, in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. And at that moment, if you're really involved in the story, your heart should sink. Because the Redeemer said, I'll redeem it. And we're here cheering on Ruth and Boaz, and it's not going to happen. It can't, because this guy's about to take my right. Because he, as a good businessman, is walking through this. He goes, I can get a land that I have the right to. I can buy the land, and then it becomes part of my inheritance. And I get all that comes with the land. I get to work the land. I get to get profit off the land. And then as I hand it off to my sons, they have an increased inheritance. What a business proposition. And all I got to do is buy the land, and I've done my duty under the law. And no one can say I was bad about it. So he says, yeah, I will redeem it. And we all go, no. We want Ruth and Boaz together. It doesn't make sense. Why doesn't he see what is going on? And so Boaz is very smart. I'm sure his heart sinks. And he goes, then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. Don't forget, we don't throw that word in there just because. It's to show that she's not an Israelite. She's an outsider. It's a derisive word to kind of put her down. And he's showing, you're going to get this woman as part of the deal. And you're not just redeeming Naomi and her land. I mean, that was part of the law of Leviticus. You're doing a different type of redemption here. Look at what he says in verse 4. He continues, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead. Now we're entering a different type of redemption. In order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Ruth's husband was the son of Elimelech. the son of Naomi. And he says, you buy this field, part of the deal is you have to marry Ruth, and in marrying Ruth, you have to try to give her a son so that he can continue the name of their family. And when he is old enough, all the money that you put in the field, all the time that you put in the field, everything that you put in the field is no longer yours. It goes inherited to a different name, a different family, and it's not yours anymore. You're doing this as the law states, but you're also doing this as the law states in a very selfless way. You know that by doing this, you're going to incur more cost than you get out of it. That's how this type of redemption worked. It was a painful type of redemption, but you're following the law because you're not only helping somebody that's destitute, you're helping the name of their family continue because the land is theirs. And so once she has a son, the land can be inherited to them and moves forward, but you have to buy it. You have to do that and earn that, and all the money that you put into it just goes away. Once it's inherited, you can't ask for it back. You can't do those things. So he reminds him that you need to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. So verse 6 becomes the answer we've been waiting for. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. So now we understand what he's saying. You're going to ask me to give up time, money, effort, and everything so that when it's time for my sons to inherit, they get less. The future of my family actually ends up with less because I had to spend money and resources over here on a family that's not mine so we can perpetuate a name that's not mine, and my family gets less. So when he says to impair my inheritance, we need to understand what he's looking at. In a business transaction, in the business world, the smart move is don't redeem it. That makes money sense. It makes sense for the future and the legacy of your family. You want to leave your children with more, not with less. I mean, isn't that, I believe that's what I would love to do. Isn't that what you want to do with your children and grandchildren? Be able to give them more than what you had, not less, so that they're able to continue moving along. So this guy goes, I don't want to do that. I'll leave my family with less. That doesn't make sense. And in a purely business world, he's making the right decision. This Redeemer, unnamed person, had a chance to redeem Naomi and Ruth, doesn't redeem at all. And so he says this in verse 6. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. And when we see the picture of that, we go, yeah, it makes sense. I wish he understood what was going on, and it would be nice to help Ruth and Naomi out and understand that the law and that sacrifice was important to them because the name and the perpetuation of that inheritance was important. And so he says to Boaz, take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So he offers him, as Boaz already said, I'm next in line, I'm option B, I'll take it if you don't. So the man says in front of all the witnesses, I won't do this. And Boaz has already said he would, but we have to understand that for Boaz it's the same thing. Whether there's a love story in here or not, the inheritance goes not to the name of Boaz, but to the name of Elimelech and his sons and that name. So even in this love story with Ruth, if she were to have a son, it doesn't become Boaz's land. It becomes the land of Elimelech. So he's operating at a loss as well. But he also understands what the law means. The spirit of the law goes beyond just this numbers and cents. And it goes to the very heart of the way God works and how he redeems people and how he loves people. And that love comes at a great sacrifice. And so he lays that out, and Boaz understands that. And verse 7 says, they signed the deal. That's not what verse 7 actually says. It says it this way. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So in front of everybody, They each took one sandal off, probably the right foot, and handed it to the other guy. Here's my stinky shoe, give me your stinky shoe, and everybody sees the stinky shoe transaction. And then they go, deal's done. There it is. That's like when the notary is signed, the lawyers are signed, everybody is signed, and all the signatures are done, and someone goes, deal's done. There it is. So they're just saying that right here. This is that attested witness that the sealing of the deal was done. I couldn't tell you, nobody really understands the shoe thing, but we do know that's how the deal was done and finalized. And then they have some words. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal, and Boaz said to the elders, you are witnesses this day that I bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Malchon. Remember the two sons that passed away. In verse 10 he says, also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Malchon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. That name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of this native place. You are my witnesses today. And he's making clear the very sacrifice that he is doing, not just for Ruth, but for the whole inheritance of her husband who has passed away and her father-in-law who has passed away, that their name will continue. And this goes at a great price. This type of redemption was not a cheap redemption, because he's not going to get out of it if it were just an exchange of land. And they laid that all out there, and when people see that, their response is open and amazing. Look at how they respond to him. And then all the people at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. These are the two ladies that gave us the 12 sons of Israel. So this is not some little matriarchal point. These are the matriarchs of the nation of Israel. May they be like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah, and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young. And they shower a blessing upon him for his act of love that is beyond just this, oh, I want to marry this woman love. It is an act of love that sacrifices everything so that someone can continue what they are doing. It blows the mind. It is not what we expected. And we look at this story as it has its twists and its turns, and we go, wow, isn't that amazing? But as we process this, and I think there's supposed to be an inheritance here, how long had Ruth been married to her husband? According to chapter 1, it had approximately 10 years. In those 10 years, in the ancient Near Eastern time, you didn't have a child immediately in the first year, in the second year, in the third year. There's a problem. There's probably a medical problem. And so most likely, Ruth, has an issue with having a child. And so now, put that math into this as well. How is this inheritance going to continue? But yet, we see this story, we're so excited for the love has come together. But this story is not about Naomi. This story is not about Ruth. This story is not about Boaz. This story is about the very love of God and how he is moving through this. And God is the one redeeming each and every person and redeeming all of Israel here. Look at what happens. In verse 13 it says, so Boaz took Ruth, she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. See that little phrase, the Lord gave her conception, gives us another clue that this son came by the very power and strength of the Lord, was a gift of his blessing. His redemption onto this story is marked and moving. And we sit there, wow, how much greater can it get? The widow who's living with her mother-in-law, the widow, it comes into this beautiful love story that sacrifices for her, and she has a son, so the inheritance will continue, the name will go on. End of story. This is great. But God doesn't end but he continues. He says, blessed be the Lord who has left you. This is how the women speak to Naomi. So this is Naomi's redemption. Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. So the redemption of Naomi, we see that happening here. We see Ruth and Boaz going through their redemption, and it continues. Then Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. She became the grandma, the good grandma that took care of her, watched over her. And because we know Ruth is a hard worker, she's working in the fields and doing the things and helping Boaz. And she's redeemed because she lost her husband, she lost her sons, and here she has a grandson. What a beautiful way that God redeems people. And the way he works it through. But he's not done. He's not done. And the woman of the neighborhood gave him the name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of Jacob. This is the grandfather of King David, the one whose line leads us directly to Christ the Messiah. You see, God is not just redeeming Naomi. He's not just redeeming Ruth and working through Boaz and their love story. God is redeeming all of Israel and all of humanity through this no-named outsider who should have never come in, the Moabitess Ruth. What a way to redeem people. Not through the very pure line of Israelite person, and they were all from Judah, and there was nothing inside this line that was outside of the line. No, this outsider, this happens more than once in the line of Christ, comes in, and God, she calls to God and says, I will follow you. And in that, God doesn't just work in blessing her. He actually instead blesses the entire nation and each and every one of us today. Because that's how he works. When he does redemption, when he does it completely and fully, but he does it in his way. Look at the struggle and the pain that this story walks through. The being a widow and having to watch your mother-in-law be widowed and then being widowed yourself. Having to go work the fields because you have nothing. And still walking in the love that God has for you. All he says is believe. And his redemption is not just a redemption of property. That's not how God works. God is not working just to redeem the property or give her an inheritance. God's really working more to redeem all of humanity back to himself. And he says, do you believe me? Do you trust this? Do you believe this love that I have? And as Christ walked the earth, he exemplified this. He asked people to believe him. And then his redemption was full and complete. In Mark chapter 5, verse 21, many of us know the story that Jesus had crossed the Jordan, the great crowd gathered, and he's walking along, and this man comes up to him named Jairus, and he's like, my daughter is ill to the point of death. We all have heard, or many of us have heard that story. He in verse 23, it says, he implored earnestly, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come lay your hands that she may be well. And so, what does Jesus do? Just like he did, he begins to walk with him. Hey, let's go. Let's go. But everyone knows Jesus is there. They're all crying around and they're doing all these things. And what happens along the way? Somebody touches Jesus and this healing power goes out of him. And we know the story of the woman with the issue of blood. And Jesus stops. Who was this? What is going on? And he has to chase it down. Why couldn't Jesus said, hey, just come with me. I need to take care of this dying person first. He's Jesus. He could have come back and found the woman and said, let's figure this out. But I have this pressing issue over here. Why did imagine being Jairus. Jesus, come on. My daughter's dying. This woman's healed already. Can't we just come back to this? The pressing issue on my heart is my daughter who's dying. And see, that's how we work with God. I have this pressing issue. I have this need. I need this now. And Jesus, in his time and in his way, is walking through this. Because his redemption is not about a physical healing. It's not about giving them the land and property. His redemption is about their very heart and soul believing who he is. And so as that story goes through, it says, while he was speaking, as he's speaking to this woman who's been healed, somebody from Jairus the ruler's house comes and says, your daughter is dead. There's nothing left. Stop bothering this man. And what did Jesus say? I love Jesus' response. But over here, what they said, Jesus said to the ruler, do not fear, only believe. That's all he asked him to do. Just believe. And we know that in the story, he leaves everyone behind. He takes a couple of his disciples and he goes in the house and they're all crying and mourning because this girl has died. And he tells them, back away, what's your problem? She's asleep. They all make fun of Jesus. And then he reaches down to her and tells her to get up. And literally pulls her out of death. And he pulls her out of death because it's not because he was trying to just make someone's family whole or make someone's property better. He pulls her out of death because he knew that somebody would be fully redeemed in the belief of who he is, he was, and always will. Because no matter where we are in life, only Jesus can fully redeem us. That doesn't mean we're going to get all our money back, all our property back, all our health back. But it does mean that in the depth of his heart, he's redeeming our relationship with our Creator through Christ the Son. That will not happen anywhere else. The greatest twist is all you have to do is believe. Not give, not jump and shout, not sign a card. Believe Jesus Christ alone is Savior. All Ruth had to do was believe that Naomi's God was the one and only God who needed to walk that way. And through her, God brought redemption to all of us through Jesus Christ. That's the story that Ruth points to. Not about Naomi, not about Ruth, not about Boaz, but about the great redeeming love of God himself for all of creation. So no matter where you are today, only Jesus can fully restore and redeem. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you just for how intricately involved you are in the details of every life. We thank you for the surprise at the very end of the story of Ruth, that is not just a beautiful story, but a story that points to your great, amazing love. That even through the story of Ruth, you were already planning the life of Christ and the redemption of our souls. And that redemption came at a great price, a sacrifice of your own Son that to this day we could never pay back. So Lord, I pray here in this room that you would move our hearts no matter what is happening in our world, in our families, in our workplaces. That you would move our hearts to lift you with praise, for you alone, Jesus Christ, can rescue and redeem us. And to that, Lord, we give you honor. In your name, amen. As we respond today, let us just sing God, abide with you.